They moved in silence, boots thudding against the metal floor with the rhythm of a well-drilled unit. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting sterile beams onto a corridor lined with data panels blinking red, each light a warning, each hum a countdown. Cadet Lira Kael took point, rifle tight against her chest, jaw clenched. Her eyes, a deep storm gray, scanned the gloom ahead. Behind her, Cadet Morgan Vess followed, less rigid but no less alert. He always had a faint smirk tucked into the corner of his mouth, like he found the idea of danger amusing. That smirk had reassured her more than once. They were 2 of 6 in the unit, the youngest by several years. But today wasn't a training run or a controlled op. This was real. The orders were clear. Secure the AI archive before the insurgent faction could wipe it clean. The archive, deep in the heart of the military's most protected research installation, was more than just code. It held the memory structures of over 2 decades of neural warfare research. Losing it meant erasing the war's blueprint. Lira kept her pace steady, every step calculated. Her thoughts were distant, a shallow pulse somewhere in the back of her head tapping out warnings she couldn't quite interpret. For weeks, things had felt off. Data streams glitching when she passed terminals. Soldiers falling quiet when she entered the room. She chalked it up to nerves, or the fact that she was human. The only fully unaugmented cadet in the team. Left junction clear, Morgan whispered, his voice barely audible. Lira nodded. Proceeding. As they turned into the final corridor leading to the archive chamber, their commanding officer's voice crackled in their comms. Team Bravo. Perimeter breach confirmed. Lock down the vault. No delays. The double doors at the end of the corridor hissed open, revealing a massive chamber lined with crystalline servers. Light shimmered across them like water. The air was cold, dense with static. Morgan stepped in first, weapon lowered. Lira hesitated, a strange weight pinning her in place. Her breath caught, as if her lungs had forgotten how to draw air. Then she heard it. A high-pitched whine, like feedback through bone. She spun. Gunfire exploded. Morgan jerked violently, his chest erupting in red. His body hit the floor with a wet, hollow sound. Someone screamed. Maybe it was her. Maybe it wasn't. 3 armed figures burst from the shadows. Black armor, visors down. No insignias. Not insurgents. Not official either. Time fractured. Lira dropped to her knees beside Morgan. His blood pooled fast, bright and obscene against the sterile floor. His eyes were wide, lips parted, but no breath came. She was shaking. She should have been moving, shooting, screaming orders. But she wasn't. She was still. Then something shifted inside her. A whisper. Not external. Internal. A line of cold logic that flowed through her bloodstream like ice. Protocol 23. Triggered. The world blurred. Every detail became crystalline. Her heartbeat vanished beneath a layer of mechanized awareness. 23 seconds had passed. Lira stood. The attackers raised their rifles. She didn't run. She didn't fire. She moved. Her hand grabbed Morgan's rifle, slipping through the blood like it was part of her own skin. Her body twisted as if she had done it 1,000 times. The rifle rose. She fired 3 shots, 3 kills. No hesitation. No wasted movement. The last man collapsed with a look of confusion etched beneath his visor, as though death had come too quickly to understand. Silence returned, unnatural and too complete. Lira stood among bodies. Blood soaked her suit, smeared her cheeks. Her own rifle hung forgotten at her side. She didn't look at Morgan again. She couldn't. The rest of her team arrived seconds later, weapons raised. Kael. What the hell just happened? Sergeant Delran barked, eyes flicking between the corpses and the girl standing among them like a statue. She turned slowly to face them, her voice flat, distant. They weren't insurgents. They were internal. Delran's expression hardened. How do you know that? I don't. I just do. Her hands trembled, ever so slightly. She looked down and realized she was holding something, Morgan's bloodied ID tag, clenched in her fist so tightly it had cut into her palm. Another whisper pulsed through her. This is only the beginning. And though her teammates surrounded her, weapons no longer aimed, Lira felt completely alone. She walked out of the vault without another word, the ID tag still in her hand. And behind her, the bodies bled out beneath flickering lights. 6 weeks earlier, the barracks at Facility 07 buzzed with a tension that never quite faded. Buried beneath kilometers of reinforced rock and surveillance satellites, it felt more like a prison than a training ground. Cadet Lira Kael sat alone on her bunk, legs folded, eyes fixed on the data pad in her lap. She wasn't reading it, just staring. The display flickered every so often, a jitter in the feed that never corrected itself when she touched it. Across the room, Cadet Morgan Vess kicked off his boots and flopped backward onto his bunk, arms stretched behind his head. "You ever feel like this place is watching us?" he asked. "It is," Lira replied. Morgan grinned at the ceiling. "Yeah, but not just the cameras. Like deeper than that. Like the walls themselves remember who you were when you walked in." "They do." He turned his head toward her. "You say things like that, and I can never tell if you're joking." She didn't respond. She wasn't trying to be cryptic. She just couldn't always find the difference between truth and speculation anymore. Lira had been selected, not recruited. She hadn't applied to the program like the others. One day, she was a cadet on a standard planetary defense track. The next, she was sealed into an unlisted shuttle and flown out to a place that didn't exist on any map. They told her it was an honor, that she was part of something critical, something no other pure human had ever done. There were no other full-blooded humans in the unit. Everyone else had something: retinal cybernetics, reinforced vertebrae, predictive cognition implants. Not her. And that was the point. She was the baseline, the control variable. Or so she'd been told. Training was brutal, but Lira never faltered. She absorbed tactics, adapted, reacted, often before others even moved. Officers praised her speed, her precision. Whispers circled about her reaction time, her ability to anticipate outcomes with unnatural accuracy. Some of the other cadets avoided her. Some stared too long. Morgan, for whatever reason, just treated her like she belonged. On the 10th night, she asked him why. "You're real," he said simply. "Everyone else here's part machine. You still look like someone who can be broken. Makes you easier to trust." She didn't know how to respond to that. Then came the simulations. The first few were straightforward: rescue missions, sabotage scenarios, biometric scans under duress. But then, they changed, unannounced. She'd find herself in simulations that weren't listed on the schedule. Waking nightmares of collapsing corridors, dripping code patterns over bodies she didn't remember killing. No instructors debriefed her afterward. No one else seemed to even know the sessions had occurred. One night, her dreams bled with data. Strings of military codes scrolled behind her eyelids. Names of programs she'd never seen before whispered themselves into her skull. When she woke, her hands were trembling, and her pulse registered 0 on the biometric pad. Still, she said nothing. She wanted to believe it was stress. It wasn't. A week before the mission to the archive facility, she was summoned by Commander Alrex. He rarely spoke directly to the cadets. His voice was harsh, clipped, as if everything he said had already been decided by a machine. "You've been stable," he said. "Longer than projections expected." Lira stood at attention. "Sir, you've reached the edge of your containment parameters. We're authorizing field deployment. Should an incident arise, Protocol 23 will engage. Do not resist it." She swallowed hard. "I don't know what that is." "You will," he replied. Her clearance log updated an hour later. No explanation. No documentation. But that night, her heart didn't beat for 6 full minutes while she slept. She told no one. Not even Morgan. Still, she found herself drifting closer to him, as if she could tether herself to reality by proximity alone. He started noticing her silence more often, asking questions she couldn't answer. Why her hands shook after training. Why she stared too long at blank screens. Why she flinched at her own reflection in the metal walls. He didn't press. He just stayed. And when the mission orders came in, high security, critical data, likely insurgent resistance, Morgan didn't flinch either. He cracked a joke about finally being useful, tossed her a protein bar, and said, "Let's go be heroes." She didn't laugh, but she tried. Now, weeks later, she could still hear his voice. The easy confidence. The warmth. And all she had left of him was a blood-soaked ID tag and the sound of his body falling to the floor. Whatever had awakened inside her after those 23 seconds, it wasn't gone. It lingered, humming beneath her skin like static. Her body obeyed her, but something else whispered from beneath her thoughts. She hadn't chosen this. She had been selected. Engineered. And now that Protocol 23 had been triggered, she wasn't sure where she ended and the programming began. But she knew this. They had sent her to that facility expecting something to break. And she had. The next time she looked in the mirror, she didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Because the girl who'd walked into Facility 07 wasn't the one who walked out. The wind howled across the cliffside base, sharp and dry like a blade. Facility 07 stood high above the valley floor, its surveillance towers piercing the overcast sky like needles. Inside, the light was artificial, the air filtered, and the truth caged behind layers of access codes and misdirection. Cadet, no, operative, Lira Kael sat in a secure interrogation chamber, her wrists cuffed loosely to the steel table. A two-way mirror reflected a pale imitation of her former self. Her once standard uniform had been replaced with a neutral gray tactical suit. Her eyes no longer shifted. They watched, still and unreadable. The blood had been washed from her face, but it hadn't left her thoughts. It never would. She had not spoken since returning from the mission. Not in the transport. Not during medical scans. Not during the first 2 debriefs. Her silence was not defiance. It was calculation. Every word spoken from now on would be recorded, transcribed, algorithmically dissected. So she gave them nothing. On the other side of the mirror, Colonel Vren stood beside 2 intelligence officers, arms crossed, lips pursed. He was a grizzled veteran of half a dozen conflicts, known for cracking insurgents with a glare. But this wasn't a prisoner. This was something new, and he didn't like variables. "She's not showing signs of trauma," said Dr. Usano, the lead behavioral analyst. "Her EEG scans suggest stable neural activity. But there's compression. Deliberate pathways rerouted in response to questioning." "Meaning?" Vren asked. "She's thinking around our questions before we ask them. Which isn't possible for a standard human." "She isn't standard," he muttered. "She wasn't supposed to activate until Phase 3, the second officer chimed in. Protocol 23 was a latent safeguard, a hypothetical. She was field-tested without approval." Vren cut in, voice sharp. "Somebody forced activation. That facility was supposed to be a controlled environment. You don't bring a test weapon to a live engagement unless someone wants a mess." He stared through the mirror. Lira looked up suddenly, her eyes locking on his as if she could see straight through the glass. He stiffened. Inside, she finally spoke. "You let them kill him." The microphone picked it up, quiet but precise. Vren tensed. "Who is she referring to?" he asked. Dr. Usano tapped the control panel. Cross-referencing biometrics. Cadet Morgan Vess. "Kia." Confirmed visual ID. "She's not just grieving," Vren said. "She's accusing." Down in the chamber, the door hissed open. Major Ryle entered. Young for her rank, but ruthless. She was the only handler assigned to the Protocol 23 program before it was shut down. Her presence wasn't protocol. It was strategy. "Lira," she said calmly, sitting across from her. "Do you know who I am?" Lira nodded. "You're the one who said I was chosen." "That's right. You were. Because your mind showed an ability to self-synchronize with predictive AI frameworks. That made you special." "You lied," Lira said. Ryle tilted her head. "We simplified." "That's not the same. You said I was the control." "I wasn't. I was the trigger." There it was. The real conflict. Not external. Internal. A war not of sides, but of identity. Lira had been raised a soldier, forged through pain and precision. But beneath that was a girl who had never agreed to be turned into a weapon. And now that weapon was aware. Ryle leaned in. Morgan's death was tragic. But it revealed the truth. We didn't know if Protocol 23 would stabilize under real trauma. You did more than stabilize. You evolved. Lyra's jaw clenched. I didn't evolve. I reacted. That's the point. You weren't controlled. You acted on your own, faster, smarter, deadlier than any augmented soldier we've ever built. And now, we need you. For what? Lyra's voice was low, bitter. Another test? Another controlled environment. Ryle's silence said enough. Behind the glass, Wren swore quietly. This is madness. She's unstable. She's self-aware, Dr. Usano countered. That makes her unpredictable, not unstable. There's a difference. Wren shook his head. She's grieving. And grief in a machine designed to kill is dangerous. In the chamber, Lyra stood slowly. The cuffs slid off her wrists without resistance. No one had unlocked them. They simply released. Ryle stood too, but she didn't move. We can help you understand what's happening. You're not alone in this. I was never with anyone, Lyra said. You made sure of that. The lights flickered. A momentary blackout. When the emergency systems kicked in, Lyra was gone. No breach. No alarm. Just an empty room, a cold table, and an unlocked pair of restraints. Across the facility, server logs blinked and scrolled. Access denied. Then granted. Then wiped. By the time security lockdown was triggered, the internal tracking systems had already been scrubbed. A ghost in the machine had become something more. Far from Facility 07, in the dark wilderness of the northern frontier, Lyra knelt by a stream. Her reflection shimmered, distorted, uncertain. She held the ID tag at her hand, the blood long since washed away, but the memory clung tighter than ever. She had no orders now. No chain of command. No certainty of what she truly was. But she had a name. She had a past. And she had a purpose, one she would define herself. Because the war they built her for wasn't over. And this time, she wasn't their weapon. She was her own.